Hi all, this is Maria Clark at Sweet Willow Designs and welcome to my studio. Today's project is another fall project for 2020. This will be my third fall project for this year. I hope you enjoy this one. Hey, please subscribe. It really helps my channel. Hit the notification bell if you want to know when I release more videos. And if you enjoy this video, give me a thumbs up and leave me a comment. I really appreciate hearing from you. Let's get started. The paint for this project, I'll be using the DecoArt Americana acrylics in Berry Cobbler, Saffron Yellow, and Burnt Orange. I'll be using the Gloss Enamels Avocado and the Dazzling Metallic Splendid Gold. For the varnish, I'll be using the DecoArt Duraclear Ultra Matte. Since I'm doing some brushwork, I'll be using a #1 round, and I will also be using the pencil eraser cap. There's one little element that uses that, and I'll be using my regular dotting tools. All of the materials are listed in the description below. Just click on the show more or the little down arrow and you'll open up that description and you'll see all the tools and materials. And of course I have an ebook for this one that you can hop on over to my Etsy shop. There's a card, you can click the link, and that's in the description as well, and pick up the ebook if you'd like the pattern. In the ebook there is this pattern that you can simply cut out. There are a variety of sizes. Now I'm using an 8x8 canvas, so I'm using the 7-inch circumference pattern so that I have a little bit of an edge because I will be framing this one. And then what you'll do is follow the guidelines, and I'm going to fold this so that I have the center. I can find the center, and then I'll have a little quadrant. So I get that set up. And then I can snip out a little bit so that I can help center this a little bit better. I'll use a ruler and I'll go edge to edge, corner to corner, so that I can find the center. I've got a little bit of tape, and I'll just go ahead and place my pattern down, get it centered, and then use a little bit of tape so it's not going to move around. I've got a sheet of Serral transfer paper, and I will slip that under the pattern. And I will use one of my nail styluses, one of the narrow ones, to go ahead and trace this design. Be sure you check it before you pull off the pattern so you make sure you've got everything down. You can add some things back in if you feel like you need to. And then I'm just using the pattern to check a size of tool that would work. And I'm ready to start dotting. For the center, I'm using my M13 9mm, and then I'm using a fairly small nail dotter to go around north, south, east, west, of course. And I will end up with 16 dots all the way around. If you can't get 16 because of the size of your tool, don't worry about it. Put 8. That's going to work perfectly fine. You can see that mine are pretty tight in there, so I could have used 8 and that would have looked perfectly fine. Now I'm going with an even smaller nail dotter, and just for reference, that center is the Berry Cobbler and the Saffron Yellow is the yellow ring. Smaller nail dotter, and I'll go in between those with Saffron Yellow again and place another row. Now I'm using a fairly small nail dotter and the Saffron Yellow, and I will just put a couple of swooshes. Now, of course, you can use any colors that you like. This would actually make a nice Christmas pattern as well. If you wanted to change out the colors, and instead of the yellows, maybe you'd want to use some greens or gold, or another Christmas color. Now I'm using my #1 round and the avocado, and I'm just stroking on, following the pattern. Those are C or comma strokes. Take a little bit of that paint off. I didn't like the way I got that paint down there. I'm picking up quite a bit of paint on my brush though, so it carries all the way through the stroke. Pressure to expand the stroke and make it thicker, and then lift up to get a thinner line. Okay, here's the last one. And that's how we're looking so far. Now I'm going to start these little elongated petals. I'm using my G6 4mm and the berry cobbler to place some large dots at the tip of each end of this petal. And then I'll be using my nail dotters to fill along the line, starting a little bit larger. It narrows at the center of each of those petals, and then I start back at the top of the other side, or at the other tip of the petal, and come down to meet the previous dots. Now I'm going in with the burnt orange and my G6 4mm, and then I'll use my large nail daughter, 3 of the same size dots, and then I'll use a smaller nail daughter to walk the dots up. To the tip. Let's look at that again. And we'll do that all the way around. Okay, I've done that all the way around, and here's how this pattern is looking so far. I think that's pretty. Now we're going to start these outside branches, and I will do the dotting in the center first, and then I will do the strokes. But before we do the strokes, let's do a little bit of practice. So I always keep some cardstock or tiles on my table so that I can practice the various strokes that I'm working with. And I just get the heavyweight cardstock, and I have an 8.5 by 11 sheet. I cut it down into 4, and then I keep those on my table. So I'm using the number 1 round and the paint. I haven't added, this is just one color here, and I'm just practicing the stroke. So I place the tip of the brush, push it down, and then release it. And then you can see that you can curve it, just changing the angle of the brush and the pressure that you apply to get the wide part of the petal. I haven't done a lot of this painting in a long time, but I'm enjoying adding it to the mandala, so I like to practice so I can get a little bit better. I'm a bit rusty. All right, now I've loaded it with the berry cobbler, and now I'm adding the bit of gold. And each one of these strokes is going to come out a little bit different with the colors. If I need to, I can stroke back over it to get a little bit more color. And I'm just practicing. Again, touch the brush, push it down and release it, and you can curve it or you can have a straight one. All right, we're going to be putting in a little line of dots. I'm using the gloss enamel in Avocado. Now the only reason it's gloss enamel is because that's what I had on my table. It could have been regular acrylic paint. It wouldn't have made, doesn't make any difference what type of paint it is. I just happen to have that one. All right, so this is similar to the pattern that we'll use. We've got our row of dots, and then we'll just add these little petals on the side. And I love the variation of color. All right, here we go. Let's do it for real on our canvas. I put 4 dots of the same size dots, dipping each time. I'm going to change out the size of my tool to go down a little smaller, put several dots. So I'm gradually changing the size, but I need to have enough dots to carry all the way around that line. Okay, I'm down a smaller tool, and now I can walk the dots to the end. Change the size of my tool, change out to a smaller tool, and then walk the dots to the end. And I'll do that all the way around, and this is what it looks like. Now we're going to go ahead and put our petals around each one of these little branches. I'm going to get a little bit of the gold out, load my brush. Actually, you can use your palette. I think the palette would work. The little wells would work just fine, but I'm going to go ahead and use a foam plate here. When you're doing the one stroke and you have a flat brush, it is actually best, I think, to use a foam plate or something flat. All right, so I've loaded up my brush like we did in practice, and I'm just going to follow the pattern. Push down and then release. Load it up. Push down and release. Push down and release. So each one of these little branches is going to be a little bit different because of the way the colors transfer in the paint. Okay, I've completed that all the way around. Now we're going to start adding some top dots and some additional dots to fill in some space here. And let's just take a closer look at this. I did let this pretty much dry before I started this particular session, just because I'm going to I didn't want to take the chance of getting my hands in the paint here. So I'm using my eraser, and I'm just going in with the burnt orange and adding a little design element in between those two saffron yellow swooshes. Okay, now I'm going to start to add some other details. I'm using the burnt orange in between these green swooshes and walk the dots up. I'm using a fairly small size nail dotter. Now I'm going to fill in some of the space here with the burnt orange. I'm using some of that berry cobbler and just adding some additional dots following the line of those yellow swooshes. I'm using my larger nail dotter to fill in this line a little bit up to the petals, and that just is anchoring those petals to the center of the mandala. Using my saffron yellow and a very small nail dotter, I'm going to drop a little crown at the end of each one of these green swooshes. Now I'll be adding some of the Dazzling Metallics Gold, and I'm just going to run a line of dots through the center of each one of these petals. And here's how our pattern is looking so far. Okay, some of this paint is well dried, and I'm going to go in and start doing some top dotting. So you can see that I'm going to put a little bit of gold on each one of these green swooshes. Do that all the way around. Now I'm going to be using my larger nail dotter, and at the bottom of each one of these oval petal shapes I'm going to walk some dots down. I'm going to place a crown at the top of each one of the petals, and I'm using my larger nail dotter for those, for the crown. I'm going to let that dry, and then we'll come back in and see what else we want to do. Okay, it's dry. Now this is where you can make some decisions about whether you want to put something in the corners. I'll try something at the end when I frame this so you can see what that looks like. I tend to go a little bit minimalist, but I know a lot of people do like to add some elements to the corner. The only thing I want to caution you about is make sure you know how you're going to display this. Are you going to frame it or what, so that you leave enough room? Using a damp Q-tip, I'm going to start running it over the chalk lines and get those removed. Now this is a damp Q-tip. It's not overly wet, and this paint is very dry. So I can remove those lines. And this is where you can start to kind of be looking at your canvas to see if there are any imperfections that you need to correct. Sometimes I get a little drop of paint somewhere, or I've wiped off a little bit of paint. So I kind of try to look critically and carefully at my painting so I know what I might need to correct. I do take all of these lines off before I do the top dotting. It's just my practice. All right, now we're going to go in and we are going to start doing some top dotting, and I'm primarily going to be using gold for the top dots. So I'll do one in the center, and then I'm using the pointy end of my let me see which one this is. This is my K10.5 6.5 millimeter, because I can get a larger dot than I can from my nail styluses, and you can walk the dot with these just perfectly. But keep in mind that they are larger, so I'm going to see that one was a little too large for the dot, so I needed to take a little bit of that off, and I'll use a smaller nail dotter on that. I decided I was safer to just use the larger crochet hook for the large dots, and then be sure I'm using a fairly small one to go finish that up. Now I'm using the berry cobbler on top of the burnt orange. It's a little hard to see. And I will do that all the way around. Now let's go back into the center, and on these saffron yellow dots I'm going to drop a little bit of the berry cobbler. And I will do the same thing on the next row of yellow. In the ebook, there's a reference to the base paint, and then there's another overlay where you can see what the top dotting was like. Now I'm using a toothpick and I'm adding the berry cobbler on top of the saffron yellow swooshes. I'll do that all the way around. And let's take a look at this piece. I did add another berry cobbler to the center, and I added 3 little dots on each one of the burnt orange eraser cap petals. And here's how, get a close-up of some of these elements. You can see that, now this is dry. I had a couple more bits of eraser that I wanted to do. And now that this has been well dried, and I'm talking days, I am ready to varnish. I am using the DecoArt Clear matte varnish, and it looks like I'm shaking it pretty hard. I'm actually shaking it fairly gently. Now I always squeeze some out in a cup because I thin mine down, because I prefer to put several thin coats versus thick coats. So I don't put a lot of water in. Basically it's just coming from the brush, and I get basically a coat on here. I do hold it up to the light to make sure that I've got every part of the canvas covered. It is easy sometimes with the dotting to miss some parts, and so you want to make sure. So now I've got a coat on. I'm going to go one way with my brush and smooth it out, very light strokes, and then I'll go the other way. I don't want to overwork it. I'm going to put several coats, make sure my edges are done. And now that has had 3 coats of varnish, and I'm ready to frame this. So I just have this is an inexpensive kind of glossy frame. It comes with glass and the matting. I'm just taking that out. I'll use that in another project. I've put my painting in and put the little clips down. And that looks great. Now this is where I mentioned that those corners might look a little bare to some of you. So I have these Swarovski crystals, and they're in a color I think called topaz. And I'll just shake some out. I was thinking that what I might be able to do is to put a few crystals in the corner. I just had these, so I don't know if it's going to work out. But anyway, I'm just going to place some of the crystals in the corner and see what we think about that. I'll do that all the way around, and then I'll see about putting one in the center. And this may just give enough for those of you that like to have something in the corner. You could do some more brushwork in the corner. That would be nice. So it's kind of up to you what you want to do. Let me know in the comments what you think. Do you like the crystals in the corner, or do you like just it plain and sort of simple, or would you add some other kind of corner element? Let me know. And that's one option for you. Okay, here's a final look at the piece. It's all framed. I did not put the crystals on it, so I'm going to leave it like this. I hope you enjoyed this project. Please, again, don't forget to subscribe. It helps me bring you more videos like this. Give the video a thumbs up. Leave me a comment. I so enjoy hearing from you. Thanks so much for joining me in my studio today. Take care.